Angelica is a talented chocolate maker who is also painfully shy when it comes to social interactions. One crisply fine fall day, she makes her way to the chocolate mill that has been in her town since 1896. She is optimistic about this job, as she fidgets with her beret in the reflection of a glass front shop. Two middle-aged women watch her from afar. When Angelica spots them in the mirror, she pivots awkwardly. She tells them she is there to apply for the advertisement that the mill has put out. The women murmur amongst themselves about her being early, then invite her into the factory office and a warm waiting area. The woman in the red coat appears after some time. She takes her to a working space, where a lot of activity is going on. She advises her not to be intimidated by the boss, as she introduces Angelica to Gene, the owner, as the first applicant for the job. Gene invites her into his office. He offers her a seat and proceeds with the interview. Gene wants someone with experience, because chocolate is a unique product. Angelica is very talented when it comes to chocolate. Too many people think chocolate has to be sweet, but to Angelica, its bitterness is what sets it apart. The varying degrees of bitterness, to be precise. The incessant ringing of the phone on his desk steals Gene's attention. He abruptly hangs it up and gets back to the interview. He asks Angelica if she really likes chocolate. Well, everyone does. She likes it so much that she took 18 classes for it. Gene has another problem though. His factory is bankrupt, and for him to hire someone with Angelica's expertise would be a life-saving decision. He stands, briskly walks to the door, holds it open, and asks Angelica to wait outside. He then goes over to Magda and Susan, and tells them that Angelica is the one. Magda asks if she should send in the next applicant, but Gene has made up his mind. Susan needs to do the paperwork and have Angelica start tomorrow. Flustered and hyperventilating, he returns to his office and locks himself in. He turns on his daily affirmations tape. I am at peace. I am centered. I trust the future. I am letting go. I am embracing life. I am a volcano. He can't stop himself from having a peek through the blinds that cover his windows. Angelica is still standing there, and Magda and Susan are filling her in. He visits his therapist later that day. His therapist asks him if the new female employee poses a problem. Gene doesn't like phones. They give him anxiety since he doesn't know who might be calling, and women in general terrify Gene. Not to get him wrong. He loves women, he just doesn't love them in the way that other men usually tend to. He loves their conversation, their lotions and potions. But he's never fallen in love with a woman. His therapist assigns him a new exercise that day. He is to ask someone out to dinner. The next day, when Angelica starts her job at the mill, she's in for a surprise. Her job isn't one of making chocolate at the factory. It is, to her great dismay, a sales representative for the chocolate mill, and she's furious. Angelica is no sales representative. Her passion is making and experimenting with chocolate. At her support group therapy that evening, Angelica confesses that she's going to step away from this job. Tomorrow, she would tell her boss that she does not know the first thing about sales and can't take this job. The next morning, Angelica walks decisively toward where Gene is speaking with Magda. She greets him good day, but before she can get to her point, Gene throws another surprise in her face. Awkward and abrupt, he asks to take her out to dinner that Thursday night. Taken aback, Angelica can only nod her affirmation. He asks whether she is a vegetarian, or if she has any food allergies he should consider before dinner. She had none. She also had no hope. Anything she says or does always messes things up further. This time, she'll be silent. There goes any chance of turning the job down. Angelica is going to give this sales thing a shot. She repeats her daily affirmations song as she marches up to a confectionery storefront. Angelica introduces herself and offers to show the store manager the products that she's brought. He is not keen on the mill's name and thinks their chocolate is awful. Also, the factory is bankrupt. He is not even interested in a free sample. Defeated, Angelica walks out. That evening, she takes a sample box of chocolate to her group therapy session. She can't understand what it is that people hate about it. The chocolate is of really great quality. The texture is amazing. It resists just a bit when you bite in, and it melts so subtly, you don't even notice. Her fellows in the group were overwhelmed by her monologue. Angelica apologizes. Her life has always been about chocolate. She went to pastry school to become a chocolate maker. That's been her dream, but if there was an exam or someone directed a question at her, her mind would go blank. She would panic. An examiner she met at school, Mark, had told her that she had a gift for chocolate, and that given proper wings, she would, one day, fly. He had managed to look past the rudeness of Angelica's non-responsive nature and noticed that she, quite like himself, was afraid of talking to people, going to work, and living life. He then proceeded to offer her a job at his store's new handmade chocolate range. There was just one catch. No one could know that she was the one making them. He told everyone that the chocolate maker was a hermit who lived in seclusion in the mountains, and that Angelica was just a delivery girl. Mark chocolates became popular. The mystery of the hermit was very intriguing to the people in that business. It became a local legend. For 7 years, Angelica blissfully lived in that lie, making chocolate at home, unseen, unknown. Until one day, Mr. Mark passed away. Angelica arrives for dinner that Thursday night, at the restaurant that Gene has mentioned. The waiter leads her to a table for two. A few moments later, Gene enters the restaurant, a briefcase in hand. When he spots Angelica sitting at his reserved table, he switches his course to the restroom. Inside one of the cubicles there, he hides the briefcase. After repeating his affirmations, he steps out to the dining area. Walking confidently to the table, he greets Angelica. Angelica gestures for him to take a seat, then realizes that they are sitting there at dinner, and neither of them knew the other's name. The waiter brings by a couple of menus then. They peruse over it for quite a while, both peeking at each other over the edge of the leather booklet. Finally, the waiter has had enough and offers to make a suggestion. Gene hurriedly orders something, and Angelica orders sea bream. At the waiter's suggestion, they also order white wine. With the order out of the way, Angelica breaks the ice by asking Gene about his take on the Middle East. Gene huffs. What is his take on the Middle East? He had no clue. Neither did he follow the Champions League. Flustered, he excuses himself to go to the restroom. As soon as he leaves the table, Angelica pulls out the little notes from her purse about topics to bring up at this dinner. International politics, football, arts. He doesn't seem to be interested in any of those. While in the restroom, Gene pulls out his hidden briefcase and changes into one of the shirts that he had in there. Being nervous always makes him sweaty. He is burning up. Back at the table, Angelica tries to steer the conversation toward English art. Gene didn't even know England had artists. Another trip to the restroom for Gene. Angelica is most certain it's her fault. She's socially hopeless. Gene is also hopeless. As he stares at his reflection, he realizes that he's put on a different shirt this time around. Angelica must have noticed. What would she be thinking? What loser brings 3 changes of shirts to dinner greater than he cannot face her now? He needs an exit. Gene escapes through the restroom window. Angelica waits at the table as the waiter brings around their main course. She tells him Gene will be back in a moment or two. Being alone with a woman is torture, Gene tells his therapist when he visits him the next day. He loves women, but he believes he is scared of intimacy and of letting them in. His father had the same problem. He too was afraid of world politics, nuclear war, his tax inspector, and those kinds of things. He had a pet phrase that he was always repeated: let's hope nothing happens to us. That morning at the factory, he delivers the sad news to his staff that Ms. DeLange has probably left them. Chocolate is a pretty tricky job, and though she seemed highly competent, it could still be difficult. Angelica comes rushing in, with some excuse of an overcrowded subway. Any other woman would have hated Gene for leaving like that, called him a louse, and would have quit the job with good reason, but she comes back to work. That's impressive. His therapist assigns him another exercise. This time, he must touch someone. Gene doesn't like touching people, but he tries. He tries really hard to pat Magda on the back, or shake Antoine's hand. He just can't. He spots Angelica leaving the mill for the day's work. He runs after her outside, and apologizes about the other night's dinner. He tells her some lame excuse about having an esophageal condition that needed immediate medical attention. He then grabs a hold of her hand. It feels nice. Usually, he avoids physical contact because his palms are always clammy, but for some reason, this time they are powder dry. The feeling is so welcoming that he can't seem to be able to let go of her hand. She is always so composed and in control. An idea strikes then, and he kisses her, thinking that the shock of the kiss would have both of them dropping their hands. It is a sweet kiss. Too sweet, in fact, that he wants to keep it going. He pulls away, apologizing. Angelica is confused. Why would he apologize for such a sweet gesture? Gene explains that being her employer puts them in a complicated situation, but it was a warm feeling, and both of them agree to try it one last time. They melt into each other's embrace, hugging and kissing. When Angelica returns home after work that evening, she is surprised by her mother's presence in her apartment. She isn't alone there, accompanied by some paramour of hers that she's only met that morning at a conference. Angelica has walked in on them sharing a rather intimate moment on her kitchen table. Nevertheless, Angelica is happy to have her mother there. Meanwhile, when Gene relays the day's events to his therapist, he assigns him an exercise of giving something to someone that day. The next day, Gene unlocks his safe at work and retrieves a pile of boxes of chocolate delight. He presents them to his employees in the main room as a gift for everyone. The chocolates are delicious, sublime, refined, flowery, and also fruity, Antoine says. Ludo thinks its flavor blends generously into a superb ganache. Gene agrees to their assessment. It is creme de la creme. When Angelica returns to the mill, Gene offers her to join them for a lunch break tasting. They were tasting Mark's handmade chocolates, the very last ones that anyone would ever taste. With Mark dead, no one will ever know the identity of the hermit that made chocolate for him. Gene admits that any chocolate maker would be lucky to have that hermit mixing chocolate for them. Angelica concedes that the mill's chocolate is good too. She knows chocolate, and chocolate deserves respect. Theirs is good, old-fashioned chocolate. She's confident that they'll someday have branches in New York and Tokyo. That day, the last of the chocolate mill's regular customers returns their purchase. The owner, Madame Legrand, tells Angelica that their chocolate has gone obsolete. They failed to evolve with time, and she can no longer sell it. She got rid of the last purchase by selling it at a loss to a customer in Romania. She won't be buying anymore now. As Angelica turns away, shoulders slumped, an idea occurs to her. She tells Madame that she hasn't tried their new range of chocolate. The first batches have been promising, to say the least, with the upgraded and enriched traditional offering. They thought of Madame Legrand's shop to be the first to taste the new line, but if she isn't interested. Angelica turns to leave, but Madame Legrand stops her short, asking her to bring her the new samples, as soon as they are edible. Angelica is elated as she dances her way back. Back at the mill, she proposes the idea to Jean. He is skeptical. Creating a new line takes a lot of research and hard work. Ludo and Antoine are nice, hardworking employees, but they can't create new chocolate. What other options do they have? Angelica wanted to enlist herself as the option. If she stays silent, the mill goes bankrupt, but if she comes forward with the truth about her being Mark's secret hermit, she'll go into a panic. That evening, she discusses her predicament with her support group members. One of them proposes a solution. Angelica sets up a webcam for a video linked to Mark's hermit. He is in fact a hermit, so they'll correspond with him through a phone call, and he, on the other hand, will be watching them through the webcam. With clear instructions from the hermit, the staff at the mill starts preparing their new range of chocolate. No whipping, only gentle stirring. Air bubbles make the chocolate sandy. Use more pink peppercorns. Add chopped peppermint. Jean suggests to add cashews with the peppermint and dark chocolate. The hermit likes his suggestion. The chocolate is finally ready to be tasted. Meanwhile, the staff has unearthed Angelica's secret. She is the hermit. The chocolate has turned out to be exactly perfect, with the right amount of spice and a velvety texture. The flavor builds slowly, and then it explodes. Jean is ecstatic. Angelica tells Jean that she'll take the samples to Madame Legrand's tomorrow. By then, the flavors will have penetrated the chocolate even more. Madame Legrand is swooning. She hasn't tasted chocolate that good since Mark's. Chocolate like that deserves a proper launch. She proposes to launch it at the Rhone International Chocolate Convention. Jean is flabbergasted by the proposition. The Rhone International Chocolate Convention is very high profile. They'll be competing with the best chocolate makers. It's a gutsy move. He wants to know if Angelica was absolutely sure about their chances, and if so, then she can go ahead with the convention. Well, Angelica wouldn't do this without him. Jean isn't keen on the idea at first, but they do say travel is good for health, and he hasn't ever been to Rhone. Their chocolate is a hit at the convention. People come flocking to their booth to enjoy the various flavors that they had to offer. Remarkable, delicious, and classic are the words being thrown around. Jean and Angelica find it hard to contain their elation. The jury finally shows up to Madame Legrand's stand. There lies another surprise for Angelica. The head juror is someone she knows very well. She was her examiner at pastry school, and a close friend of Mr. Mark's. He instantly recognizes the uniquely extraordinary taste. That chocolate was made by Mark's chocolate maker. He expresses his desire to see Mark's hermit, now that he's come out of retirement. Madame Legrand assures him that someday they might be able to lure him out, as Ms. Angelica Delange knows him personally. When the juror turns to Angelica, he is stricken by a sense of familiarity. Angelica assures him that they've never met before. That evening after the convention was over, Angelica and Jean arrive at a hotel they had reserved earlier. The receptionist hands him a single key. Jean has had 2 separate rooms reserved. Apparently, there has been a mix-up, and now the hotel had no vacant rooms, due to the chocolate convention. Chocolate is very popular in Rhone. They had no option but to settle for a single room. The room is spacious though. After standing in awkward silence for some time, Jean offers to take a walk to their dinner venue. They arrive at the restaurant drenched, because as soon as they stepped out, it had started to pour outside. Angelica is soaked to the bone. She might have caught a cold too. As they sit for dinner, the conversation starts to flow between them. Before they know it, more than half of the room has gone empty. The dining area is near its closing hour. Angelica suggests that they should return to their room then, but Jean is flummoxed. He does not want to return to the room just yet. There's one more thing he wants to do. He eyes the jazz orchestra playing in a corner of the room. A Russian song is playing, and he's going to sing that to her. The song is a proclamation of love and desire. Angelica thoroughly enjoys Jean's performance, and the double entendre isn't lost on her. When they finally return to their room, the air in there is thick with suppressed desire. Jean offers to sleep on the couch. Sadly, there isn't any in the room. Angelica excuses herself to change for the night. She's nervous too, as she repeats her daily affirmations, while the water runs in the bath. When she steps out, Jean is nowhere to be seen in the room. Nursing a glass of red wine, Jean sits at the hotel bar. The errant drunk receptionist sitting next to him remarks that Jean's wife, Angelica, really loves him, and that he should not let a love like that go by. He had been eyeing them at dinner, and their chemistry had been apparent. Head advises Jean to return to his room into his wife's arms. When Jean makes it to their room, it's pitch dark inside. Since the only place to sleep was right next to Angelica on the bed, Jean tries to make as little sound as possible while trying to get in. Suddenly his body is pinned underneath someone else's. It's Angelica, he sees, as she turns the bedside lamp on. She professes that she has fallen in love with him. Breathing raggedly, Jean admits his affection for her. Angelica leans down for a kiss, which soon continues into long sensual moments of heated desire. Once satiated, they lay side by side. Angelica then expresses her conjecture. Now that they're in love, they should get engaged, or better yet, they could simply get married. She warns Jean that her mother can be very domineering, and that she wants to have 2 or maybe 3 kids with him. Jean is finding it hard to breathe. He jumps out of bed, telling Angelica that he'll be right back. Angelica watches him run away into the hotel grounds. Hopeless is what she's always been, and always will be. She packs up her bag and checks out, mere moments before Jean comes running back into the hotel lobby. He runs back into the room, shouting that they should definitely do what she wants, only to be greeted by an empty room. Angelica has left. The next day when he visits his therapist, he confesses his love for her to him. He loves Angelica madly, but in a way, he feels relieved too. Relieved of the fear, the anxiety of love, and the problems that relationships bring. He informs his staff that Ms. Delange has left them for good. His speech is interrupted by a phone call from Madame Legrand. She's called to tell him that the hermit won the top prize at the chocolate convention. They now have 40 orders to dispatch. It's fabulous news. Antoine tells Jean that they can't let Angelica go. She is Mark's hermit. The camera and that computer, they were all a ruse. Angelica is the one who created their new line of chocolate. As per Magda, Jean owes it to his factory to get Angelica back. They really need her. Not to mention the fact that he is very much in love with her, and she him. Magda offers to take Jean to Angelica so he can make things right. Susan has her address from her application. The 5 of them arrive at her apartment building. Too afraid of the outcome, Jean couldn't bring himself to step out of the car. They sit in the car, staking out, when suddenly Angelica steps out, dressed for the day. Where is she going? Susan suggests to follow her. They follow Angelica to an old, but well-kept, community center. Magda tells Jean that it was now or never. Agreeing with her, he steps out and follows her into the building. Emotions Anonymous meetings. Every flyer on the billboard at the entrance had that heading to it. Jean stumbles into the room, where Angelica's group session is being held. The group leader spots Jean and motions for him to join their circle. Jean grabs a chair and sits right across from Angelica. Astonishment colors Angelica's features. What was Jean doing there? As Maxim's monologue ends, it is now the new member's turn. Jean introduces himself. He confesses that he is emotional and shy. When he's in love, it feels like he's burning up. He wants to face his emotions, but there's this woman he loves. She's so talented. She's also emotional, like everyone in this group. She is the love of his life, he has now realized. He'd like to ask her to spend a while with him, making chocolate together forever. That is, if she loves him still. He concludes his monologue then. It's Angelica's turn next. She doesn't beat around the bush this time. She tells Jean that she does not believe it will work between them. They are a recipe for disaster. They'll get to know each other to the core, then annoy each other, stop communicating, and end up hating each other. They are too similar and not strong enough. It's best that they stop now. Jean hasn't viewed their situation in that light. He cannot stay, then. Thanking Angelica for the eye-opening reveal, he leaves. The group does not agree with Angelica's decision. They won't sit around watching, while she destroys her chance at love. Angelica runs out, stopping Jean as he leaves. She dives at him for a kiss. She can't let this go either. Few days later, Antoine helps Jean with his cravat, as they stand in the chapel's dressing room. He asks him if the wedding day has been causing him any stress. It has been, and he is feeling hot and flustered again. Once redressed, he sets about to locate his bride-to-be. If Jean is stressed, there's a fat chance that she would be freaking out as well. He finds her in a closet, her gloved hands clammy. Her stomach is full of butterflies. As they are professed man and wife, Jean grabs hold of him Angelica's hand, and they run out of the chapel, away from the intimate crowd. 2 introverts, in search of their own little space of heaven.